Metal Gear stands right next to The Legend of Zelda as one of my favorite video game series of all time, with its synergistic melding of unique and interesting characters, a mind-boggling lore spanning across decades of pseudo-history with a supernatural twist, over-the-top action and badass sequences, emotional scenes, cathartic moments, and ridiculous circumstances. Metal Gear was love at first sight. When it comes to storytelling, a well-executed combination of grounded and unorthodox is simply irresistible to me. That's why I'm such a huge fan of the likes of Christopher Nolan, whose movies like Memento, The Prestige, Inception, and Interstellar all evoke that same sense of grounded realism combined with mind-bending surrealism that I absolutely love. But on top of all that, Metal Gear games also feature some evocative stealth action gameplay, which, like the story, permeates that strange mix of grounded realism and mind-bending and often bizarre surrealism, not to mention the awesome fourth-wall-breaking moments that have become a staple of the series. This unique blend of realism and surrealism, story and gameplay, all executed through Kojima's crazy yet sincere vision, lie at the heart of what makes the Metal Gear series so special. With that in mind, I've decided to compile and rank all of the canonical Metal Gear games, an endeavor that proved to be surprisingly difficult since I've come to appreciate every Metal Gear game for their own unique qualities. However, I can't deny that some games left a better impression than others in both subtle and big ways. Obviously, my preferences may differ from yours, so keep in mind that this is all subjective. My goal with this video isn't to declare one game as being better than another, but to simply share where I personally stand with each Metal Gear game. So let's begin. Coming in 10th and last place is Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops. I debated whether to include this game on the list, but it is technically canon within the Metal Gear timeline. Neither directed nor written by series creator Hideo Kojima, it stands as the only canonical Metal Gear game that didn't really blow me away. The game is generally hard to control, levels lack any real flavor, dragging around and recruiting soldiers quickly becomes a chore, and the 20 frames per second performance makes for a frustrating handicap. The game isn't unplayable by any means, and it's still a very competent PSP game, all things considered, but there's just a general absence of thoughtful design and attention to detail. However, Portable Ops makes up for its gameplay faults with a compelling story in which Big Boss and Roy Campbell team up to stop the insurrection of ex-Fox member Gene and his troupe of supernaturally enhanced individuals, all presented with beautifully drawn Shinkawa-style comic book cutscenes. Gene in particular makes for a formidable villain to rival Big Boss, and the game also does a really good job of planting seeds and foreshadowing pivotal future events in the series' timeline, such as Big Boss's fall to villainy, the formation of Outer Heaven and the Patriots, as well as the rise of the Twin Snakes. So while Portable Ops is marred by somewhat lackluster gameplay, mechanics, and level design, it's saved by genuinely interesting story and characters. I also happen to think that Portable Ops' main theme, Calling to the Night, is among the best in the series. Coming in 9th place is Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, the prologue chapter to the Phantom Pain. I did consider fusing Ground Zeroes and Phantom Pain into one listing, but since they were sold separately, I have no choice but to look at Ground Zeroes as its own game. It's a solid game at that, featuring some of the smoothest and most intuitive controls and stealth action gameplay the series has ever seen. Camp Omega also serves as a compact yet fun open-world sandbox playground that can be infiltrated through a variety of creative approaches, with the game's multiple missions doing a great job in breathing new life to the one map. I also have to commend the game's presentation. There isn't much in the way of story here, being a prologue and all, but what few cutscenes we do get to see are ambitiously presented with incredible finesse. The long-form cinematic one-shots in particular are truly a sight to behold. Finally, and most importantly, Ground Zeroes does a fantastic job of introducing the new approach to storytelling and gameplay that Metal Gear Solid 5 would take. It was a delicious appetizer that had us craving for the entree, but being just an appetizer that was sold separately from the full meal at a steep price, it's difficult for me to justify placing Ground Zeroes higher on the list, even if it does serve its purpose well. Coming in 8th place is Metal Gear, the game that started it all. For its time, this game was on a class of its own, but from today's perspective, there is no denying that this is Metal Gear at its most basic. Story is practically non-existent without other entries in the series to supplement it, and mechanically speaking, stealth and combat are very simple, exploitable, and haven't aged very well. But even with its shortcomings, this is still a highly entertaining game. The level design in particular deserves high praise. Despite some of the annoying guesswork involved in progression, Kojima and company did a great job in making Outer Heaven feel like the massive, heavily guarded, and dangerous fortress it's meant to be, making infiltration seem like a genuinely epic and monumental task, and the Metroid-style item-driven progression system is quite fun and rewarding to boot. This game also deserves a lot of credit for not only being pivotal in establishing one of the most beloved video game series in gaming, but also the stealth genre as a whole. As a bonus, I love how even back then, Kojima came up with clever ways to play with player perception. I bet a few minds were blown following the realization that Big Boss's true nature as the leader of Outer Heaven and the game's main villain was hidden in plain sight through his name. It turned out that Big Boss was the game's Big Boss. Oh, Kojima, never change. Coming in 7th place is Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, the continuation of Big Boss's saga following the events of Snake Eater and Portable Ops. The game kicks off strong with an immediate story hook, the possibility that Big Boss's deceased mentor, the Boss, may be alive, serving as a fantastic backdrop to a pivotal chapter of Big Boss's arc, all presented through beautifully drawn Shinkawa-style comic book cutscenes a la Portable Ops. Compelling setup aside, the story is alright, but definitely not among my favorite in the series. Something about it just feels a little sloppy, particularly in the way the theme of peace is presented so on the nose, and overall, this feels like one of the sillier entries in the series, even by Metal Gear standards. The final battle against the half-naked Paz piloting Metal Gear Zeke while J-pop music plays in the background pretty much says it all. The silliness is endearing, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, Peace Walker isn't the best Metal Gear has to offer from a narrative perspective. There are some highlight moments though, particularly the final moments in which Snake relinquishes the boss's ideals to set out on his own path as Big Boss. Building up to that, we also get to meet some interesting and quirky new characters, complete dozens of bite-sized main and side missions, and build up an army without borders. Kojima doubled down on the base building aspect that Portable Ops first established, and the payoff is strong. Watching MSF grow is equal parts fun and rewarding. The process of recruiting soldiers was streamlined through the implementation of the Fulton recovery system, and the ability to assign your recruited soldiers to one of the various mother-based departments to research and develop new tools and upgrades makes base building all the more addictive. I only wish that the game's missions were more expansive and interesting. I'm well aware that Peace Walker's bite-sized missions were created with a portable experience in mind, and in that regard, Peace Walker's mission structure succeeds, but in the grand scheme of things, levels feel short and disconnected from one another, a stark contrast to the large-scale and intricately interconnected world design from other entries. I also have to criticize the lack of proper boss battles. Rather than engaging us in one-on-one duels against supernaturally enhanced individuals, Peace Walker presents a host of repetitive, heavily armored vehicles to fight against. They can be fun in their own right, but destroying lifeless machines isn't nearly as interesting or personal as dueling living, breathing characters with their own agendas and motivations. But despite my numerous gripes, Peace Walker stands as a game whose whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The ridiculous story, the addictive base management system, and the bite-sized missions come together to form what is overall a fun, cohesive, compelling, and portable Metal Gear package. Next up, coming in 6th place is Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, a culmination of both some of the best and some of the worst that Metal Gear has to offer. The first two acts are still among my favorite in the entire Metal Gear series. Expansive environments strewn with war and chaos, thoughtfully designed levels, a variety of infiltration options to approach your objective, a vast array of weapons, items, and tools to help you in your mission, all paired with phenomenal graphics, lifelike animations, epic cutscenes, a steadily developing plot, and stellar presentation to boot. Unfortunately, that's all counteracted by Act 3's odd combination of a dull tailing mission and an on-rails chase sequence, Act 4's beautifully nostalgic, albeit poorly executed trip to the iconic Shadow Moses, and Act 5's clusterfuck of a mission structure. The Beauty and the Beast boss battles also feel less inspired than bosses of other entries, even if they do boast really cool and unique designs. But then I fall in love with Metal Gear Solid 4 all over again when I think about all of its incredible individual moments. Liquid Ocelot's insurrection in Act 1, Raiden's epic battle against Vamp in Act 2, Liquid Ocelot's domination in Act 3, the beautifully reimagined Shadow Moses and the Rex vs. Rey battle in Act 4, the microwave hallway sequence and the final confrontation between Liquid Ocelot and Old Snake in Act 5, and the surprise appearance of Big Boss and Zero in the epilogue. There are so many unforgettable moments in Metal Gear Solid 4, but the overall experience is unfortunately held back by a general lack of consistency and cohesion on both story and gameplay fronts. The story in particular is a bit of a mess, having too many intricate narrative threads to wrap up in one game. But with all said and done, I fucking love this game. When it's bad, yeah, it's bad, but when it's good, it is so, so good.
You're pretty good.
You're pretty good. Pretty good.
Coming in 5th place is Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, the first game in the series that took stealth action gameplay to realistic new heights. While it retained many aspects of its prequel's level design and progression structure, so many nuances were added to the stealth action mechanics that have now become a staple of modern Metal Gear. The ability to hold enemies up, to drag bodies and hide them, to hide inside lockers, to aim and shoot specific body parts, to tranquilize enemies instead of outright killing them, to neutralize enemy patrol before they can radio for backup. The list just goes on and on and on. Both the player and the enemy AI's capabilities were taken to the next level with incredible attention to detail. Also receiving a dramatic improvement was the cinematography. I would say Metal Gear Solid 2 marks the time that Kojima finally started coming into his own as a cinematographer, giving the game a level of panache that was unprecedented for its time. The game also broke new ground in video game storytelling with its mind-blowing final act. I was a kid when I first beat Metal Gear Solid 2, and I remember feeling my sense of reality falling apart as AI Campbell went haywire, and I struggled to understand the meaning of it all. Memes, simulations, the S3 plan, control of society through control of information, yada yada yada. All things that remain very relevant in our current modern day and age. By the time credits rolled, I just stood there in silence trying to process what the fuck had just happened. It was both uncomfortably surreal and blissfully impactful. The game wasn't a perfect experience though. Where Metal Gear Solid 2 falls apart for me are in some aspects leading up to the game's final moments, starting with the protagonist, Raiden, who I still think is generally unlikable, even if the game's final moments does shine a new light on the character. There are also certain sections of the game that I didn't particularly enjoy, like Emma's escort mission, among others. Most damning of all is that Metal Gear Solid 2 treads too much familiar ground. While there is a good reason behind the game's ever-present sense of déjà vu, it still makes Metal Gear Solid 2 stand out a little less than other entries in the series. There's also something about the dual hexagon design of Big Shell that I'm not particularly fond of. It makes the game just feel a bit more on rails and linear than Metal Gear Solid 1's Shadow Moses, or even Metal Gear Solid 2's Open Tanker, which feel more like sandbox playgrounds for players to stealthily explore. But despite my numerous qualms with Metal Gear Solid 2, when I consider how much the game evolved the series' stealth mechanics and cinematography to new heights and how it challenged conventions of video game narrative, I cannot help but perceive it as one of the most impactful Metal Gear games in the series. Coming in 4th place is Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, or as I like to call it, Metal Gear Solid 2D. Just about every facet of the mechanics and designs that Metal Gear 1 established received major improvements or a significant overhaul in the sequel, from level design, items and weapons variety, boss battles, combat, to overall stealth action gameplay, especially with the addition of new mechanics like the ability to crawl, the radar system, and the alert timer. This was also the first time in the series in which Kojima decided to implement a substantial narrative with unpredictable twists and turns, as well as fleshed out characters, some of whom make their debut in Metal Gear 2 and others who return from the prequel in unexpected ways. There was genuine intrigue and surprise to Metal Gear 2's story as I infiltrated my way through the mighty Zanzibar land fortress, all while maintaining a pleasant level of simplicity that made the story easy to follow despite its twists and turns. So with a combination of excellent and refined 2D stealth action gameplay, improved level design, and a compelling yet easy-to-follow story, Metal Gear 2 stands tall as an all-around excellent, well-rounded, and tightly packaged Metal Gear game. And this isn't nostalgia talking. Before Metal Gear Solid 5, Metal Gear 2 was the last game in the series that I played and finished. And even then, by the time I was done, I couldn't help but be impressed by how remarkably well the game has aged. It's a near-perfect 2D Metal Gear experience in the way that classic 2D games such as Super Metroid or A Link to the Past are often considered to be near-perfect 2D representations of those respective video game series. Speaking of classic, coming in third place is the renowned, the one and only Metal Gear Solid, the first Metal Gear game I played and beat. It's the game that drew me in the series in the first place, so it holds a very special place in my heart. But it's not just the nostalgia goggles that make this game a classic. While aspects of its controls and gameplay mechanics feel dated by today's standards, that's easy to forget when so many other aspects remain timeless. From a gameplay perspective, it's hard to resist Metal Gear Solid's simple, fun, fast-paced, arcade-style stealth action gameplay. Its compact yet intricate level design that's further enhanced by Shadow Moses' intoxicating atmosphere, and unforgettable boss battles that hold iconic status in not just the Metal Gear series, but all of gaming. Metal Gear Solid also marked the series' first transition into the third dimension, which paved the way for the introduction of new mechanics like the ability to survey your surroundings in first-person view, to hug walls and peek behind corners, and the implementation of scenario-based camera shifts that served to further enhance stealth action immersion and tension. The shift to 3D also paved the way for in-game 3D cutscenes that were way ahead of its time, serving as a gateway for Kojima to present one of the most cohesive, well-paced, heart-pounding, and unpredictable stories in the series. The whole game plays out like a paranoia-induced mystery, so when I first played through the game, I found myself constantly on edge as the game's plot unfolded before my eyes, with no shortage of surprises throughout the 10 to 15 hours experience. But if I had to pick one aspect of Metal Gear Solid that triumphs all other games in the series, it's the extraordinary cast of characters. From the brooding yet charming Solid Snake, the imposing yet endearing Colonel Campbell, the rebellious Meryl Silverberg, the kind-hearted otaku scientist Hal Emmerich, the dubious Naomi Hunter, the delightful Mei Ling, the unhinged Gray Fox, the progressively suspicious Master Miller, and of course the seminal Sons of Big Boss, my favorite group of villains in all of Metal Gear, comprised of Decoy Octopus, Vulcan Raven, Sniper Wolf, Psycho Mantis, Revolver Ocelot, and Liquid Snake, each of who have become iconic in their own way. I love these villains because they not only offer some of the best boss battles in the series' history, but also because they feel like genuine characters and human beings rather than just a bunch of crazy folks you have to kill. You learn something new and often tragic after each encounter that humanizes these characters, and it makes you sympathize with them to some degree. Sniper Wolf's story and her dynamic with Hal Emmerich in particular is a great example of this, and I'm also a huge fan of Psycho Mantis' final moments. So combine the unforgettable cast of heroes and villains with the game's fun, fast-paced, arcade-style stealth action gameplay and its engaging and unpredictable story, and you've got a recipe for a game that is uniquely extraordinary. While Metal Gear Solid may show some wrinkles around the skin here and there, particularly where gameplay mechanics are concerned, its heart still beats as loudly and proudly as it did when it first launched nearly 2 decades ago. Coming in second place is Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. I don't know what to tell you, I love this game. At the same time, I understand why some Metal Gear fans were disappointed with it, particularly where the story is concerned. Despite being advertised as the story of Big Boss's fall to villainy, it turned out that Phantom Pain was never Big Boss's story to begin with, at least not in the literal sense. And while Kojima's intentions to immortalize players into the series as the other Big Boss was admirable, the overall execution left a lot to be desired. Certain characters also didn't live up to our expectations. Ocelot was no longer the flamboyant gunslinger we know and love. Skullface didn't quite live up to his terrifying presence from Ground Zeroes, and characters like Eli were kinda just left to hang. But story and character woes aside, Phantom Pain not only features some of the most awe-inspiring in-game cutscenes and overall presentation I have ever seen in a video game, with constant implementation of expertly crafted long-form cinematic one-shots, enhanced by lifelike character models, animations, and environments made possible by the powerful Fox engine. It also features the best stealth action gameplay in the series. From a mechanical standpoint, Phantom Pain streamlines the controls so that it's easy to pull off complex maneuvers without having to fight the controls, all while retaining core aspects of Metal Gear gameplay. On top of that, this is the first and only Metal Gear game in which stealth scenarios don't feel scripted, but rather like systems upon systems dynamically interacting with each other to create a live stealth simulation, all taking place in an expansive, dynamic, seamless open-world environment. The result is a game where each mission has limitless approaches and can play out completely differently with every playthrough. Looming over all of this is an enhanced mother base system. Like in Peace Walker, players are able to recruit soldiers via Fulton Recovery System, assign them to various departments, construct expansions to the base, and research and develop new items and equipment. But at the same time, every facet of base management has received a facelift. Whereas Peace Walker's mother base could only be accessed through menus, Phantom Pain's mother base can be physically traversed, allowing players to walk around, greet recruited soldiers, and experience a variety of important in-base developments. Furthermore, in Phantom Pain, Mother Base actually feels connected to the rest of the game. Being able to use your iDroid to have Mother Base seamlessly send items, weapons, armor equipment, and resources to a specified location, or to request aid such as intel and airstrikes at a moment's notice, go a long way in making players feel like they're actually commanding a formidable and resourceful military organization. The result is a Mother Base that feels not only like a hub, but also like an interactive and powerful part of your arsenal. It's the combination of intuitive and streamlined controls, enhanced stealth mechanics, the systems-based simulation-like open-world mission structure, the expansive base management system, the vast arsenal of unique items, weapons, equipment, tools, and resources at your disposal, and the way these elements compound and interact with one another that culminates into a Metal Gear game that, from a pure gameplay perspective, is on a completely different plane of existence from other games in the series. Simply put, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is the most fun I had playing a Metal Gear game. Unfortunately, the overall experience is marred by a handful of ugly spots, such as a poorly executed climax, a half-baked Chapter 2, underdeveloped characters and villains, and baggage such as false advertisement, the excluded Mission 51, microtransactions, the ugly side of the game's development history, and other controversial aspects that seep into and corrupt this package in a way that it holds Phantom Pain back from reigning supreme. In the end, there is really only one game in the series that deserves the title of Big Boss. Coming in first place is Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, the culmination of everything that makes the Metal Gear series so iconic. Not gonna lie, when I first played this game, I had a hard time getting through it. I found the original game's bird's-eye view only camera was ill-suited for the type of expansive tropical forest environment that the game expected me to infiltrate, resulting in a lot of frustrations. It wasn't until they freed up the camera in Subsistence that I really began to appreciate the game. But even with Subsistence's improvements, Metal Gear Solid 3's main appeal has never been its gameplay. Aspects of its controls can feel cumbersome and unintuitive, with too many buttons needing to be pressed for the simplest of actions, making unintentional mishaps a common occurrence. And while I appreciated the game's survival elements, such as a limited inventory space and the camouflage, cure, food, and stamina systems, their full potential is marred by the constant necessity to go in and out of cumbersome menus. Even aspects of level design can feel slightly less compelling than other entries in the series, since Snake Eater focuses on moving from one self-contained area to the next in linear fashion rather than infiltrating through one big, intricate sandbox. But this new structure structure also gives Snake Eater the flexibility to constantly present new challenges and unique stealth scenarios in a way that previous entries wouldn't be able to do, so the game stays fresh from beginning to end. In one area, you may find yourself having to improvise as you're being ambushed by a unit of elite special forces while you're confined in a small space, and in another area, you may find yourself infiltrating a facility disguised as a scientist. The boss battles in particular greatly benefit from this design, as entire areas can be custom-tailored to serve as a boss battle arena. Speaking of which, it's no secret that Metal Gear Solid 3 features some of the best boss battles in the series. Dueling a young and cocky Ocelot never gets old, and the battles against members of the Cobra unit all have something unique and bizarre to offer. The sniper duel with the End is a particular standout, and the encounter against the Sorrow blew my mind with how creatively it used the concept of video game deaths. And how can I forget about the final battle against the boss, one of the most tragically beautiful sequences I've ever seen. Volgan also made for a despicable and formidable foe, and that epic battle against the Shagohod, man, what a thrill. I also love this game's cast of characters, second only to the original Metal Gear Solid. Major Zero and Paramedic present some of the most memorable and hilarious codec conversations in the series. There's never a dull moment in watching cocky young Ocelot getting pummeled left and right and slowly evolve over the course of the game. Eva's role as the Bond girl makes for an interesting dynamic with the socially awkward protagonist. Volgan remains a despicably unforgettable villain, just straight up a piece of shit. And the boss, with her unparalleled devotion and loyalty, still stands as my favorite character in the Metal Gear series. But where Metal Gear Solid 3 really goes above and beyond is the story. And it all begins with a presentation. Taking inspiration from 1960s spy movies, the game quickly establishes the mood for an upbeat and at times satirical adventure that's also fraught with a constant sense of peril, urgency, and personal conflicts as the stakes continue to escalate throughout the game's progress. The confidence that this game exudes in its vintage spy thriller motif is really something to behold. But even more awe-inspiring than aesthetics is how the story builds towards a powerful, emotionally cathartic climax by placing the relationship between Naked Snake and the boss at the heart of the story. It's this focus on characters' personal conflicts and relationships that made stories like The Last of Us so powerful, and it's exactly what makes it so heart-wrenching to finish your mission and finally pull the trigger that kills the boss, or to watch Snake break as he finally sheds a tear, saluting his deceased mentor in her grave. Snake Eater also serves as a beautiful origin story that sets the tone for all the future timeline events that follow, particularly Big Boss's fall to villainy. No other Metal Gear game in the series both expands the lore and achieves this level of emotional catharsis with such finesse, and combined with its confident retro presentation, memorable characters, unforgettable boss battles, and stealth action gameplay variety, not to mention that it's just a phenomenal complete package with no baggage to corrupt the experience, Metal Gear Solid 3 still stands as Hideo Kojima's greatest, most comprehensive achievement. And with that, I would like to conclude my ranked list of every Metal Gear game in accordance to my own preferences. Now that I've shared my list, what do you think, and how does your list compare to mine? Be sure to share with us your list and your reasoning behind it in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things Metal Gear, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!